nice that you can join us all the way from Zimbabwe and helping lead the holistic management network there in Zimbabwe.
Thank you. Thank you, Skid. And hello, everyone.
Hello.
Are you all in one room?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of people here.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. And up here. Okay.
Wow, that's very nice. And I'm so happy to be with your class today. I know we have about 1.5 hours together. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. So, I just prepared a lot of things so that I can share as much as I can a bit of my knowledge, experiences, and the design processes. So I'm in Zimbabwe, Victoria Falls. I personally used that photo because that's when I came to Washington State last time when I attended the Global Earth Repair Conference. So just to introduce myself, I'm the African coordinator for a network called Regeneration International. And with Phiri, I'm an accredited field professional for education in holistic management. So my set of skills has evolved around working with rural communities. So breaking down this whole big regenerative language and design and principles. So breaking it down so that it works with the people on the ground and using our cultural norms and systems to actually mobilize communities to action. And then working with communities here, we use a trust called Igugu Trust because legally, I think those are the structures to then access communities because that's a space that's mostly usually accessed by using non-profit organizations. So I have that called Igugu Trust. Okay, so I'm going to dive into a little bit of the African context and maybe also mix it with my context where I work. So I work in Zimbabwe and then most of Southern Africa and East Africa. So the communities that I work with are mostly agro-pastoral. So where I was born, we do both cropping and pastoralism, agriculture. And then I also have experiences of working with tribal lands of Kenya, the Maasai and the Samburu cattle people. They are mostly nomadic and they have huge spaces of land, but also very insecure communities with basically gun violence and lots of violence and because of dilapidating resources and advancing land degradation. And the thing about being an educator of holistic management, you find out that it's really not new tools as such to our people. But I think with evolving and introduction of industrial agriculture and this financially obsessive form of living or form of agriculture led to then extractive methods being applied. Nothing wrong with abundance financially, but if finances are the absolute goal that you are going after, we find that people tend to be very degenerative, and I'm sure it's your guys' experience as well, to get profits and bumper harvest at whatever cost. But then if finances are an outcome of regenerative decision making or even an outcome of our actions that are towards building our soils, they definitely tend to lead to abundance, and that's the security and stability that communities have been looking for years. But the work is a lot because the same communities that we work in have gone through a lot in terms of being exposed to a lot of donor aid NGOs, and most of them have left them at a far worse state. And in other instances, the land is very arid, and like where I am and where I also come from, and really harsh climate extremes. There's lots of insecurity overall, such that I think the confidence of people in actual solutions, is slowly but surely dwindling. But I think the more we are able to show results and things, and so I also did share these pictures on the side for you to see the kind of livestock. And here at the bottom, this is a village in Samburu land. It's extensive lands that are very bare and very dry, and this is right in one of the communities that I work in at the peak of rains, where animals are supposed to look their absolute best. But, because of continuous degradation and poor practices, you find that communities don't have hope for, a stability in terms of wealth. And wealth is mostly from the land and their animals. So there's a bit of notes here about the stats on Africa and how much degradation has actually happened on the continent. But there's two views to look at this. Are these challenges or are they opportunities for us to actually dive into the solutions that we've been exploring, I think, in the movement? And I'm sure you guys have had an incredible week also learning about all the efforts that are happening globally. And it's definitely an honor for me to also share what we are also doing. Okay, so the potential on the ground in Africa and at policy level, we have hundreds of thousands of grassroots and international organizations that are working on regeneration and or restoration or agroecology or ethical. I don't know what you want to call it, but in this case, I'm just sharing based on holistic management. And then at the African Union level, there's the Pan-African Agenda for Ecosystem Restoration. These are very good words with our policymakers, but I think our work as the civil society has been to really continuously be on the face of our policymakers to help them make management decisions that will support living systems to thrive. So it's a lot of work, definitely, but I think the voice of the hundreds of thousands of farmer groups that are on the ground right now in Africa is magnifying each and every time. And we partner a lot with these two, Alliance for Food Sovereignty and Seed and Knowledge Initiative. As a matter of fact, one of the writers of one of the small guidebooks for agroecology training to help disseminate information to farmers, communities, and consumers. Okay, so my set of skills evolves around holistic management. And here you will see I wrote holistic land and livestock management. So this is the part of the breaking down of the communal language, because I think if you just say to someone, holistic management, people tend to rush more towards the tools that they've heard that go together with holistic management, which if you say to someone, I'm bringing the knowledge of holistic management, they'll think, oh, okay, so you're bringing the knowledge of grazing or using animals as a tool to impact rangelands. But in essence, holistic management is really a design process, as is permaculture, and a thought process, because it is a decision-making framework that helps a land manager or a manager of an organization manage their organization to suit the context where they are so that they will thrive economically, socially, and environmentally. And this management body of knowledge is really crafted by a man called Alan Savory, who's a Zimbabwean-born biologist, and he developed most of his concepts in the African rangelands. So that's how he then designed the tools that are in the holistic management framework. But this doesn't limit holistic management to only grazing. The tool or the framework of holistic management will help you even choose maybe a tool of creating water harvesting pots in your land, if that's what you need. But we can thankfully also share the tools that we use here in the African drylands, which lead to more impact and do not have a trace of destruction. But if well managed, the tool of livestock actually has been bringing lots of solutions in the cropping sphere and regenerating grasslands. Okay, so I wanted to give you just a little bit of the differences in the holistic view versus reductionist view. I don't know whether you guys have actually met this before, but there's like, oh, you guys are so reductionist. So it's not really a space for insult, because I think that anyone who's been putting effort in managing their land, we sort of feel like maybe they did it on purpose so that they continuously gain. But I would like to differ, because I feel like anyone who tries an effort on the land, even if they use synthetic fertilizers, they had a good intention in their heart. They thought they were chasing harvest, but they lost sight of what we call unintended consequences, which means you just continued to pour inputs onto a soil, for example, so that you fill your barns with food, and then you sell, and then you feed the world, as the sayings go. But then you lost sight of the impact of your actions on the soil microbes, the microorganisms, that what conditions do they need to thrive so that this soil can continue to be fruitful, taking care of us for generations, without us hemorrhaging again finances, having to add on inputs. Because once you use inputs on the soil, we are learning that every year they tend to sort of demand more and more. So reductionism is, in hindsight, loss of sight for how complex living systems are. And I hope this is helpful to unpack to you holistic management. It's easy to jump onto the tools, because I think each and every one of us can learn our land very easily. But I think what has led to the problems that we are in is management decisions. For example, what do I mean? You know, there's a tendency, if we see a practice that is good, this will probably be the fall of regeneration. If we see a practice that is good, we tend to want to copy and paste the same in our environment without really thinking more about what are things at play socially, environmentally, and economically in my region. So should I take the whole thing and use it here? Will it work for me? Is it culturally relevant? Does my land or the ecosystem processes here, will they improve if I implement it? Or what principles can I copy and shape them according to the needs of my land or the needs of my organization? So we usually use an example of a watch and a human body. A watch is complicated. If you do not have skill sets of how to fix it, you can actually damage it further. But if you have been trained and you're an expert in fixing broken watches, a broken watch, you can open it and then you say, oh, okay, this arm got stuck here. Let me fix it. Very complicated. If you have no knowledge of how to fix it, you can never fix it. And then let's take my body. Let's say I get hurt and then I can't use my right arm anymore. My body, so my watch, I make the watch and I can fix the watch. I manage my body. I didn't make my body. I am a manager of my body. And therefore, if my arm is hurting, my body self-organizes. My left arm gains strength, and then I can continue to function almost normally, as if nothing happened to me. So that's what happens also to our land. If we manage it using the mechanistic view, we keep losing the battle because we try and manipulate different parts of a whole living system. Is that clear?
Yeah. Great.
Okay. All right, great. So that's us just giving you at least the fundamentals of what we base our training on. And I think it's the same in permaculture. It's a design process and everything. So I was just sharing with you from that angle. And then there's this thing that we do also with communities before we actually, so there I was explaining how the world makes decisions. We tend to make decisions towards a goal. So we want to achieve A, B, C, D. But then when you are using complex systems, you develop a bigger purpose. And then all your decisions, or you develop a vision of values, all your decisions are made with the backdrop of the decision, these values that you've spelled out. But before communities even do the vision, it's good to understand the place you are managing. So know who are the decision makers, whether it's a farm or an organization, or you want to start some work. It's good to know who are the people involved in making decisions and how will they influence what you are trying to do. So my work involves lots of social mobilizing. And I think these are some of the critical questions because you want to know who are the stakeholders involved in this work. So this work is usually very stressful because it's transformative. And I'm working with communities that have been used to donor aid. And so you have to keep probing and dialoguing so that they unpack all the tools that are at their reach. And then so you go to the resource base. So what resources are available to you? You list all of them, including the people or organizations that you work with or people where you can get support from. For example, if you have a piece of land and you know that you want to keep goats and maybe you don't have enough forage for your goats, if you're going to do silver pasture, for example. But then there could be a government land next to you. You can list those as some of your resources so that you know how to approach them because these are people whose support you will need for your goats enterprise to be successful. And then money, know what money is available to you. This is now budgeting so that you are profitable and you don't run into debt. And also state how your community or your enterprise is currently accessing funds. And sometimes we know that money is a very sensitive issue, and especially where this money is coming from. Because sometimes we tend to see big corporations funding regenerative work so that they can keep degenerating and then keep throwing the few changes towards regeneration. So sometimes as a regenerative person or a regenerative organization, you have to be careful where you accept your funds from. So because, you could be supporting a big extractive industry instead of an industry that would advance regeneration. Okay, and then we go to decision-making for regenerative actions. So in holistic management, like I said, it's a totally, completely beautiful decision-making tool, which can be used for people in farming and in a normal everyday city setting, or even in running a family. So this, we with communities, we've been talking a lot about improving our mindset towards abundance. I'll just share even from today. So abundance thinking, when I've been working with communities, I realized that when you translate abundance, I'm sure it will affect your groups the same or not. If you say abundance, it still leads to scarcity mentality that it's only one person amassing wealth or lots of cattle, lots of crop. But we've been translating that abundance thinking into abundance and generosity. So whether you have much or less, you want to share. So today we were developing our vision of values here with one of the communities. And we were saying, so how do we relate as people? And then someone said, well, we will share surplus. And then one person, after us unpacking abundance and generosity, said, well, what if we don't have surplus? Does it mean that we won't share? Oh, wow, that's incredible. Because then that means we share as a way of life. So whether we are bound or we have little, it's all in our mind. So you can have a lot, but still feel like you have very little. So which leads you to continuously grabbing things to yourself. But if you have little and you still consider it much, you are free to share and therefore continue to share, whether it's information or food or things like that. So this is what we've been using to help communities making decisions. And if you notice, I continuously do not use holistic management or holistic context when I'm working with communities, because the framework is definitely holistic management, but the language is simplified to then bring out the principles and the key insights that guide holistic management. So I'm going to give you an example that probably shows us a bit of reductionism unintendedly and regenerative or holistically made decisions. So this is a story that I picked up definitely on Facebook, basically. So it was a guy who asked, help, I just saw a rat in my coop area. First time ever, what do I do? So these pink things, it's me who underlined, and I was scraping off people's names because this was a public group. But I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting, because I was looking at the responses, right? And so this guy has rats in the coop area. And one guy says, come and get some of my cats. And then another one says, they need a kitty, right? So what do you think about these responses? Here is a problem. We've seen a rat in the coop area. So yeah, we don't like rats, right, with our chickens. But there are people here offering help. Come get my cats. So, oh no, they need a kitty. So what do you guys think?
Generosity.
Understanding the problem.
Okay.
What are bringing them back?
Okay. So
would the cats be dangerous to the chickens?
Oh, really? One thing I thought of was that if the cat comes in, you have a chance that the cat is not really the appropriate cat for the context. But if you bring a kitty in, then you both get the human bonding with the kitty that is way cooler than the cat. But you also get the kitty. You also get the kitty being raised in the environment where there are rats to hunt, and so it will more readily adapt to that.
Can you hear that?
All they would be eating.
yes, I'm hearing.
Oh, yeah. So one person says in some countries they eat rats.
Yes. So no, definitely in my context too, if you need to solve the problem of rats, definitely you need cats. They will take care of rats. They also take care of snakes. So yeah, so they're an incredible tool in a certain context. But let's think of chickens and your neighbor's cats that didn't grow up with chickens, for example. Would you introduce the tool of cats, or would you ask yourself first a question? What could be drawing rats close to my coop? And are these cats okay, or they can jeopardize my enterprise? Because also in my case, if cats don't know chickens, they'll eat them.
It's like,
are you guys following?
Livestock protecting animal has to be raised as a livestock protecting animal, but you have to feed that livestock protecting animal, which might, whatever you're feeding them might even, influence the number of vermin that you have. Be really cautious with how you balance it out.
Exactly. So you want to be conscious how you balance it out. You want to be conscious with, okay, what could be drawing rats here anyway? Maybe, am I cleaning my coop well? Maybe my chicken food is outside, and then rats can easily access it. And then next thing there'll be rats. And then if you are in my country, in my region, next thing you have big snakes chasing after rats. You've started an ecosystem that you don't want. But then what could be the possible solution? You want, when you're addressing a problem, you want to dig the root cause so that you get the appropriate tool as a solution. So we'll be bringing cats, addressing the root cause, or we'll continuously have a cycle of rats wanting to come after the food that's outside the coop. Who knows, right? It's like when you have a headache. It's easy to get paracetamol and just drink it. But then what if you had another cause, a deeper problem than you just drinking and making the pain lie low? Because the cats will just eat the rats in the moment, but then more rats will keep coming because you didn't necessarily take care of the reason why they are coming to your property. Are you guys getting the drift?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that's great. So I really loved this example. When I saw it on Facebook, I was like, yes, I'm taking it. And it makes it really makes a nice way to chat with communities, because sometimes, like at community level, you don't even have PowerPoint to show anything, but it's mostly dialogue, but then dialogue that is in pictures of words and sayings and things that we know and relate to. And so this is one of their best examples. They really loved it, especially today. Now, when we are done defining all that and accessing how we make decisions, we say, let's now create a holistic context. A holistic context is like a broad statement or vision of values of what we want our quality of life to be like now. And then from there, what we want the future to look like. So you don't necessarily have to do it now because maybe we won't have enough time. A holistic context is a statement of values that helps us make decisions, right? So whatever decision that we're making, we are saying everything that we will do as an action, a family or an individual must lead me to the quality of life that I've stated, right? So here is the things that you answer as you create your holistic context. What is the life that I want now, right? So in this quality of life, so when I'm working with communities, I always make sure that I break them into 3 groups. Those that will define how they will live with one another socially or culturally, yeah? You want it to come out well if you're working with a group. And then economically, what sort of life do we want in terms of our livelihood? And then surroundings, which is our environment. And then other values like the freedom to, today something funny came out. So one of the groups, they were doing the social gathering, the social state of the community. They're like, we want people to marry only in the surroundings. And then right there, because it's a very remote area where I'm working. So there are chances that there could be control on who marries who. So it was a nice opportunity to unpack issues of human rights and a freedom of choice on whom you love and who you want to spend your life with. So it was really a beautiful time. And others were like, no, that doesn't resemble who we are and things like that. But it was a nice teachable moment. We always call it teachable because I'm also learning and they also maybe are learning from my sharings. So what is that life that I want now? So in these statements of the quality of life, you do not quantify, like you do not say, I want to spend like $100 a month. No, but you can say a broader umbrella statement, and you cannot say, I want to have 10 goats, not in the quality of life. You just want healthy livestock or thriving livestock so that you don't limit yourself to goals. What if your land keeps improving and you can take care of more than 10 goats, so you then limited yourself in your vision of values. And then number 2, what we call the future resource space, we ask years from now, what will the future look like? So now you're spelling out a legacy you envision for your future generations if you were to sustain the quality of life that you have now. So this is in 2 forms, the environment and then your behavior. Your behavior is like the society or cultural norms or forms that you want to adopt for you to continuously sustain this quality of life. So for example, if we are to sustain a life of peace, we have to be people that are people of integrity, people of their word, people who are trustworthy. That's an example. And then for the environment, you want to live an environment that is clean, with ethically built buildings, lush, green, flowing rivers with lots of life. And then so you understand that you are the ones to make that happen, and that's what you want to leave for the future generations. So I'm going to share just mine, which is what I've been using as a guide for my own work. I sort of developed this vision to help me also keep myself inspired, because obviously when you keep working and you're juggling a lot of things in life, you have to have that thing that keeps you going. So I wrote it as a dream. So I said, I have a dream where all living systems are thriving and living at their full balanced potential. I dream of communal food sovereignty with individuals that are reverent and proud of their roots, deeply connected to their source of life. I dream of abundance, soil health, healthy river systems, wildlife and human health, climate health and financial viability for an unending future. And I'm a part of this dream. Whenever I work with communities, my attempt is to create this dream for it to live in those that I serve. The reason why this is so deep and it's so deeply connected to me is the understanding that every decision that we make as managers would affect the future that we leave behind. And as a person who works with communities, it's almost always tempting to use prescriptive methods. But then if you work and grow together with your communities, this dream keeps me grounded. And therefore, I keep thriving towards it. You can never really fulfill this, but some sort of positioning of your mental state and life helps you keep going. So it's some sort of vision, but more of towards values and pictures that you see. And that picture there is the Masai Mara in Kenya. It's so beautiful, isn't it? It's one of my favorite pictures. And so, yeah, okay. So that was a little sharing there. So when you've made your holistic context, which is the vision that I just read out, you have, you can have it, write it down and keep it there on your wall, and that's fine. But then a thing that keeps you going is what we call the filtering questions or testing guidelines. And here I've put in the simplified version, but they're just perfectly the same and okay. So these testing guidelines, they help us manage those things that we call unintended consequences, because it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, okay, so I'll give an example of the flies that happened, the desert flies that happened in East Africa. I think it was 2 years ago. I can't remember, but yes. So they're called desert flies. I think it's 2 years ago. So that means they thrive in places that are arid, dry, and not covered. Yes? So their eggs multiply in dry spaces. But then when the desert flies happen, they eat all the crops, all the tea plantations, everything, anything green. They sit on it, and when they stand up and fly away, it's all nothing. So policymakers and people who were well-wishing to help these communities that had desert flies, they came and sprayed on the flies. So if you're spraying a fly that's already fully developed, what else have you left on the desert sand?
Eggs. Maggots.
The eggs and maggots are still there. Or you're also destroying all the other good things too.
The environment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And they're predators.
Yeah. So, yeah. So then you're like, so will the action of spraying the actual locust, is it fixing the root cause? No, because maybe we were supposed to rather take it slowly and improve with speed and make ground cover and reduce the land where they thrive. And then you are done. You've cut short the cycle that makes them thrive. Otherwise, controlling a flying locust, you are just repeating the problem. So definitely we got it. And that's exactly how you are testing your questions. And sometimes you may have to take an emergent action, but you also acknowledge that this is not necessarily addressing the root cause, but people are hungry, and yes, we will accept bags of maize for them to eat, but eventually we know that this action is not sustainable. We have to continuously be implementing some actions that will make us come out of dependency on food aid, for example, right? So these are the questions that you ask yourself. Will this action help or harm what we manage? if you're spraying, you're harming many more things, and sometimes people end up having diseases that come from the toxins of the sprays. Yet you meant well, you want to take out the locusts, but then you missed everything else that will be impacted. And then will it harm our relationships? Will this action help or harm our livelihoods? What do we feel about this action now? So what's been funny about relationships, there is a thing about compost toilets here. So I know you guys know about them, but for us, culturally, oh my God, it's a big deal. Like, what? You just stored your thing right there and you're going to use it where exactly? So like you're likely to run a loss, for example, if you were running a vegetable garden, because they're like, oh, don't worry about buying. It's all poop. So again, we just have to take it slowly. So I have a couple of friends of mine that we've started to introduce compost toilets in our own zones, but we do not put it outside. So one friend of mine has actually constructed her compost toilet that stays there, and people don't see where this thing is going, and then it will be manure after some years. And then when you start spreading the information, you will know that by the time this has composted into manure, a couple more households would have adopted it. So there's an introduction of lead toilets that happen, which are like pit toilets, which are the worst, you know, but then that's what is more acceptable now. But when they were first introduced, so in a rural home setting, there's like a mother and father, and then their sons who are married, and then, so it's like, and then a father-in-law will say, I will never get into the same toilet with my daughter-in-law. So you can imagine some of the challenges that have been broken down by just introduction of toilets. So I know that the composting toilets are also going to take a while, but eventually people will ease into the idea of human manure. Is that good?
Yeah. And
So sometimes socially it may, go ahead.
I would say that last year was the worst year for locusts in Africa and Asia. It was the worst year in a long time, you know, so.
Yeah.
And hopefully
I think
it won't
that's
repeat.
last year. Those are the locusts that I was talking about. Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kira. So I was just using some living examples to see if we can relate. So anyway, let's now go into the technical bits of holistic management. The 4 key insights that guide holistic management, nature functions in wholes. I think we got that already, that we do not miss the interconnectedness. And I think your question now as a person who's managing the land is, how can I contribute to make every part of my place thrive? So that I don't win in only one segment, but in all spheres. And so here I have these pictures that are very symbolic of what we manage for here, which is the wildlife and other living things that do not talk for themselves. And then our livestock, which is our interest and wealth, water bodies, and how we relate. That was me in Samburu land after some trainings, and it was time for celebrations. And then the brittleness scale, which talks about the spread of precipitation across the year. So if you understand your ecological context, you will know what tools to apply. Some areas are drier than others and more brittle than others, and therefore the tools differ. So now it calls for us to understand the ecosystem processes. And then in grazing, so now whether you're grazing goats, sheep, cattle, time is more important than numbers. So now you're talking about how much your grass plants or tree plants are exposed to an animal before the next grazing, which is what we call recovery in holistic management. In drier regions, recovery takes longer. And then in more moist and rapidly warm and moist regions, recovery takes shorter. And so you can graze the same place over and over in a short space of time because growth is rapid. And then the predator-prey relationship, livestock properly managed can heal the land, which means when these animals are followed by lions and cheetahs and hyena, their behavior, they keep grouped, as you can see there. they trample, dung, urinate, and because they are in such large numbers, they have to keep moving to fresher grasses. And when they live there, they are being moved by predators who are affecting their behavior on the land. And when they are tensely grouped like that, their action or movement causes healing on the land. So this is what we learned here to adopt it to moving our animals like that.
So, question.
And that's when now we call it. Yeah.
A couple questions. One is how healthy is the predator population, or how big is the predator? What is happening with the predator population in Africa?
So I would say we had threats to the lion populations because I think mostly it's a very big question that you've asked, because when land was split into reserves, there were obviously fences, and so these animals move in a very limited space. When it was before they fenced off the reserves, these animals used to freely move across the regions. So now lion populations have been threatened, so is the population of other species that are food to especially lions. But over the years, I think management has been improving, and we are doing lots of talks, especially Mr. Alan Savory, with the policymakers of the game reserves to really introduce management that will be holistic to bring back the populations again. Because if you look at their sensitive populations like sable populations, antelope populations that have drastically reduced, and it will take a lot to bring it up. So it's not only the predator populations that have been suffering, but it's also the prey populations. Yeah. So now I have to ask myself, how do I recognize the relationships that exist in this ecosystem, and how can I enhance them as a manager? And like the thing of remove people and do conservation, that's a known phenomenon. Like, you cannot separate people from nature. And I think that it's high time we accepted that and work back the systems of how can we be stewards again so that everything flourishes. Okay, so there's this quote that I really love. It was said by Alan Savory. It says, ultimately, the only wealth that can sustain any community, economy, or nation is derived from the photosynthetic processes, which is green plants growing on regenerating soil. It goes back to what we define as wealth. We're defining this today with communities so that we know where the true source of wealth comes from. The true source of wealth is in our context, from these grasses that will help our animals thrive, and then we can enter into the marketplace, or the ground cover that enables our croplands to have a bumper harvest, and we can continuously feed our families while having a healthy land. So I'm going to jump into, this is what we call the understanding the ecosystem processes. So before you implement any tools, know your solar energy flow so that you maximize the photosynthesis by green plants. And then water cycle, which is how are you going to capture water? Are you going to use water harvesting, and also couple it with grazing animals so that you impact a much bigger land while showing immediate results with other water harvesting techniques that we've been learning. And then the soil mineral cycle, ensuring that you have activity in the soil, both in the growing and non-growing season. So keeping that balance. So in our areas where it's brittle, definitely in the non-growing season, you need animal hooves to trample and break down grasses so that when it rains, there is enough sun going into the soil and causing the grass plants to shoot up again, especially if they are perennial grass plants. And then we have what we call succession or community dynamics, which talks about the biodiversity so that we develop more complex communities of plants and living things, which brings more resilience. It's the same notion when you're cropping. The more diverse, the more resilient, because you are almost proof of diseases that would destroy your your field. Okay, so part of my community is we work anywhere, and sometimes under the hot sun, sometimes near water bodies in the open, but we get the work going using participatory tools and showing pictures, visuals. Most of the tribal communities, most of them can't read, so we use the local language to break down the information, but to bring out the principles. And this is some of the tool that we use. This is a problem tree tool where we discuss here the problem is unhealthy land. What causes it at the roots? The root causes. So you keep asking questions to get to the root cause, and then people prioritize. So we have 4 root causes, and this is how it has affected our life at the top. And then you change that into a solution tree that has, okay, our dreamland, which is healthy land. What are the root solutions or root actions that we must take for us to have healthy land? And then from there, what will be the impact, or what is the quality of life when our land is healthy? So you use everything from drawn pictures, writing, and here I used a color coding of cards. This pink card is for the problem tree. The blue card was for the root cause problems. Here, the yellow cards are for the quality of life, and the green card is for root solutions. And the pictures are also different, bare and barren land. And this one is a happier picture with thriving grasses and people in them. And so we use this and translate it into a vision of values. These leaves here, they become your quality of life. And this healthy land here is your future resource base. And this at the bottom are the programs or actions that you want to do for you to bring back healthy land. And then these are the tools of holistic plant grazing, which is a very intricate planning process, but also very simple because it helps communities understand their land, but also plan movement of their animals. So let's look at this herd here. And you can see one animal is moving, but also animal impact on the soil. I don't know if it's clear for you guys. So we are mimicking the wild herbivores in the African rangelands, but just using our livestock and the human herd effect so that humans and their dogs can keep moving their cattle on the land to get this kind of impact that will keep the living systems rejuvenated on the soil, dunging, urination. And then here is the chart that we use. So this is the grazing plan chart, which helps you know how you are moving these animals across the land. So they don't just move, it's well planned on the map, which is a land plan. So this land plan goes with social planning, which is what sort of social structures or bylaws are communities proposing, and also what herding teams are available to keep moving with the animals across the land. So now you're showing these are croplands, and then these are homesteads, and these are all the designated paddocks, so to speak. But even croplands are also paddocks when we are not cropping. So all the land is used in planning and in sync with what the communities have come up with. And this chart helps them know that in January, for example, we are in this paddock, and then for how many weeks, that's what these boxes are for. It's a very, it's as loose and as friendly as possible for the communities, but also taking care of all the questions of each piece of land. For example, if we have one place that is a valley, and there's lots of moisture that settles on the grasses, you can't go in the peak of the rains because you have ticks that may impact or affect your animals. So you avoid that area until it's a little drier. So it's very intentional, and to take care of the land needs, the farmer needs, you need to make profits and have healthy animals, and animal needs. The animals need to be well taken care of, have easy access to water and easy access to good forage. And this takes a long time before farmers get to know about it. So every season, in the growing season, you have a different chart. In the non-growing season, you have a different chart. Please take note, we use growing and non-growing because we don't measure growth by just the amount of rain. but how much exposure each plant has to the animal. So growing season is when we have a rapid growth, and therefore we are careful how much we keep each herd in each place so that we allow for recovery, so that we have enough food or forage in the non-growing or slow-growing season. For us here, we call it non-growing season because it's extremely dry and very brittle. But then in other areas, it's slow growth because you have some sort of precipitation, but the temperatures are not friendly to growth. So that's like your winter seasons. You have slow growth, but some form of growth. And I don't have a big experience on that, but that's just my thought. So here's what we call on the recovery periods. Let's say now you are doing your grazing. So in our areas, we use 90 days as recovery period because we have intermittent rains. You can have a good rain today and then like dry for 3 days, and then another good rain and then dry for more days. So we take a long time before we go back to a plot of land and reintroduce animals. So this is good growing conditions. You can go there very fast. You can see between 30 to 60 days, you can go back to the same plants. But for us, you have to go back at least after 90 days. That's when you would have grown very well. And sometimes in the growing season, that's where you have overgrazing. Let's look at this grass plant here at the bottom. I hope you can see it. I'm sorry if it's small. Grasses adapt when they've been overgrazed. You see them by lying low and growing like that. This grass plant is a type of plant that grows going up. But then when it's feeling pressure from the animals, you start to see it run away, basically. Sorry for that word, but yeah, that's what I will use. And you can see around here, the spacing is very bad because this is a good soil, but then because of management of livestock, everything is overgrazed and after some time gets uprooted. And communities get to learn about this. We call it ecological literacy. We use very visual demonstrations of cutting the grass and cutting the roots, demonstrating that every time the grass is eaten in the growing season, the roots are working to bring back the leaves back to life because it's a time of rapid growth. But the more you come to eat the grass, to graze the grass, the more you bring your animals to graze the grass, and then the more the grass plant works down the roots. So then you keep cutting top and bottom until you uproot the grass plant. And that's how we create deserts. Is that clear, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to show a bit of the results now. I call them potential benefits because that's what we've seen work here. And I think it works in every region when well implemented. Okay. So I'm just showing you one of my favorite pictures of these river streams. This is like a small stream, but it's clean, clear water at the peak of a rainfall season. So the water is not muddy because you're not losing any soil into the stream. The river banks are very stable because every time animals actively move on and off, and there's active growth of grasses. And definitely when it's in the dry season or non-growing season, this river stream doesn't flow from rainwater, but it flows from the springs, which is how rivers should flow. Water should be captured into the underground water recharge. And when the underground streams are full, that's how we should get water coming to the surface. And then that's the ground cover there that's been created over time. As animals graze, you have a thick layer covering your soil, which slows down movement of water every time it rains. And then there's some animals that are going to be enjoying this water. Yeah. And then this is the community that I worked with. Oh, okay.
A question. In this country, there's a movement to not let livestock have access to streams directly, bring water from the streams to the livestock instead of livestock being on the banks of the streams. How about in Africa?
Oh no, our animals go to the banks. it's unnatural to make them drink in drilled wells because they evolved with streams. But unfortunately, because most of the streams are dry, so of course people pump water now for animals. But if you have healthy and running streams, you are free to go and have your animals drink. But then unfortunately, in some of the communities that I work with, I have some that are situated next to the mines, which means now the streams are intoxicated with, it's a coal mining area. So those streams are now dangerous to animals. So yes, communities are drinking their animals further and further afield from the mines, but here it's allowed.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then let's look at the Samburu community, where I worked with this community. Yeah, I mean, I've seen arid areas before, but when I got here, I was like, okay, what have I set myself up for? But you also bring in the principles of holistic management and the great confidence that I've seen it work. And I remember because one, this is a very patriarchal society. And so it was nice to have women because I was also a woman. And so they were more vocal. And when I had to introduce myself to the elders, I had to say tribally where I come from. And thankfully, I'm from a tribe of very honorable, brave warriors who also kept cattle. So we are big cattle people. And so you have to introduce that whole cultural background of yourself and that you are from a very brave tribe. And therefore, you are honored to speak in front of the elders. And, this gave us a platform to then continuously challenge, how decisions have been made, whether by the elders or the government or the women, whoever made it. And so this is one of their trial sites that they've started. Most of their land was like this, but now they've started having their animals together in big herds. And slowly but surely, I keep getting these photos from the partners that are working in Kenya, and which is absolutely amazing. The fact that they keep the communication looping and going. And I remember one of the social issues with working with these kinds of groups, if a challenge has been raised to the elders, as a facilitator, you cannot necessarily challenge them in front of everyone, in front of the young men or the women. So you pull them to the side, continuously feed the honor that they hold in this community. And I am not even lying. At the end of the day, we went up to a hill so that they show me their big land and then how they are planning to reverse this challenge. And I think those are amazing baby steps, but definitely the partners that are working here, they are super excited about what's possible. And I think it's one hectare at a time, honestly, that's being changed. It's going to be a while, but definitely we're moving towards somewhere good. And then this is a healing of a river system. As you can see, rain and no water here. And then here you have clean flowing water. So you can also manage your water stream so that they start getting lots of your streams to start getting water. And we call this sort of rivers, it's a low-hanging fruit because this community has already started practicing. And so after some time, signs of healing will show by having pools that take longer to dry, and then eventually a little flow, and then after some years, you start having the stream flowing. And then a story of Rangeland Restoration. I don't know if you guys have seen some of these photos, but I used to work at the Savory Center as a full-time Savory Center employee here in Zimbabwe at Victoria Falls. But now I'm an accredited professional who continues to partner with them because we continue to take communities to learn there. And I still teach the Savory courses as part of a Savory accredited professional training. So this is one of the sites that was healed from 2006 after 30 years of being bare and losing soil. But 2014, the elephants and other animals prefer these grasses now. So most of the marks are down, but the land continues to thrive. So this continues to give. And I continue to work with communities, especially to improve crop yields and improve soil. So the soils are like this. It's sandy and literally zero food. So we use these enclosures here. And sometimes people just support buying these enclosures for communities. And then we put communities in groups to then maybe 3 or 4 people, because they don't have large herds of animals. And then after the livestock has slept in these enclosures on the cropping lands, this is how the soil looks. And then they plant their crop, intercrop, have cover so that they don't lose moisture or water. And then we always have what we call field days, a celebration of all the harvest. And then we have seed savings and seed exchanges at the end of the day. And then this is the South Africa, which is in the Karoo region, another dry zone. And this is the fence line difference. And you can ask yourself, do you think here it rains more than here? No, the difference is just management. And then I decided to share some barriers to implementation. I think we see the problem, but or we can see the solution, but we lack a deep understanding of the problem. So we tend to think that maybe the problem is rainfall or whatever. But then I think the more we dig deep, sometimes it's just decisions of management or how policies are made towards managing different environments. So there is no copy and paste. Each environment is unique. And then decision making at both local and government level, again, I'll say it again, agricultural policies. So this was in Samburu, working with the community leaders of a big conservancy. We just finished all our work, and so we decided to take a nice group photo, which I really admire for a while. And so, I just left these questions. What are the chances and relevance of implementing what we shared here in your context? And can you think of any possible challenges that you could face if you were to try implementing any of these things? And then what have you learned that will make you successful as a manager? So I'll just leave this here, and I don't think or know if we have time to dive in, but I really wanted to just share and hopefully that this was helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we will look at, take some questions here. I have a question to start with, and I think of the possible challenges here. We have a lot of grazing. This is a grazing area. Much of the land was overgrazed 50, 100 years ago, and there's been some recovery, but it's still not looking good. And most of the ranchers here, the livestock people, you say, oh, we want to do holistic management. And they say, well, we can't afford all the cross fencing. We can't afford the amount of fencing. What happens in the African context? Do you cross fence, or you just have enough people and dogs to keep the animals moving?
So thank you, Skida, for asking that. I think honestly, our opportunity here is that we have lots of people who do this and on foot. And we cannot afford to fence here, because when you fence, people cut the fences and go and use them in their houses. So, so here we use what we call virtual paddocks, which is you use demarcations. But then I understand that in your context, it's very expensive in terms of getting all the infrastructure. But then I see also some holistic managers, and that some of them are part of the Savory Hub, some of them are not. They've been improvising on all these mobile usable fences instead of getting those expensive stationary fences. They use lighter ones to just demarcate. Especially, I don't know what other attributes are needed for you to be able to do that. Maybe in some places you have other predators, I don't know. But and then there are some that do it on horseback and then get herding dogs. So That's a few that I've known. But here there's lots of us who can herd, lots of people. And for example, one community can have a herding team of 13 people, 14 people who can take turns week after week.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, and use a lot of, so people help herd the animals. Do you use dogs and as well for herding?
Yeah. So the dogs are not necessarily herding, but the dogs can alert you if there's danger, and especially if there's a predating animal close by. But we just have skill sets of herding.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. We have Doris, just people will come up here and ask questions. We have
Okay.
maybe 15 minutes.
Thank you so very much. This
Okay.
is really, really inspiring. I'm tied to several different communities, and one of the communities that Penny knows a lot about has a national reserve, and within that national reserve, there's an elk population, but there's also ranchers that have been there for over 100 years that have entitlement within this national reserve. There's a lot of controversy about fence lines and dairy cattle versus wild elk. But where I am in Colorado, the rancher has cows in the spring and summer, but in early spring and winter and fall, the elk are allowed to move through the property freely because we're surrounded by national forest. And many of the horse ranchers and cattle ranchers allow the elk on their property, in part because there's no way to keep them out. I'm wondering, is there a movement in Africa to have these boundaries between wild rangeland and domestic rangeland be more flexible?
So, like I was saying, I think that's one of the efforts that we've been trying to put here. It's called, we usually host something at the Savory Center called a solutions retreat, trying by all means to break the boundaries that have been set between people and their domesticated animals and the wildlife. Because I don't know about your case, if you notice, the whole places that have been set as reserves are degrading massively and very fast, because that movement and relationship between the animals and the land and the people and the land has been broken. So yes, there is some sort of policy influence that is going on. And I think it has to start at policy level, because when they started the reserves, they meant well, they called it conservation. But I think it has done more damage than good, because even socially, people don't care anymore about the wildlife. That's why there's a word poaching now, because everyone thinks, oh, okay, that's the enemy. It's benefiting a few people. And then we are struggling with our wildlife and our livestock, actually. So yes, there is